This is an Audi RSQ8. It has a price tag of $125,000 and it's quite possibly the most underrated and most bang for your buck SUV on the planet. It has a twin-turbo V8 that's shared with the Lamborghini Urus and even the Porsche Cayenne GT, all while having the practical features of an Audi. So the two questions come to mind. What's it like, and should you consider buying one over the competition? All right, so let's start off by looking at the interior first. So having driven several Audis before, I'm very familiar with the interior space of this RSQ8, and I actually quite like it. The words I like to use to describe it are clean and efficient. Clean and efficient because it's very simple and nicely designed. The dash, the buttons, the layout, it's all well placed and easy to use, and the functions behind it are also very good. Size and comfort wise, it's great in here. I think this is the right size SUV. Sitting at 5'11", I have plenty of headroom, I have plenty of legroom. The seats are very, very comfortable. They're heated, cooled, and massaging, and all of these functions work very, very well. And they've got these very unique looking red stitching cross patterns on the seats, which makes them look super cool. Next, let's cover tech very quickly, and this RSQ8 has a 3-screen setup. One in front of you acting as gauges, one for infotainment, and another for your climate controls. Personally, I like the way Audi's technology is set up. The gauges are easy to read, customizable, and present good information. The infotainment system, even though not as good as iDrive from BMW or PCM from Porsche, I've come around to it after using it more often. Finally, the climate controls behind the screen might be a turnoff for some, but in my opinion they work great, and the fact that they have their own screen is good as opposed to sharing one with the infotainment system. Alright, so now let's look at the back seats. Sitting at 5'11", you can see I have plenty of legroom here. I have maybe an inch or two of headroom. Somebody 6 feet or taller may have an issue sitting back here. Remember, the sloping roof of the Q8 gives it a little, or sacrifices some of the headroom back here. Otherwise, very comfortable space to sit in. The seats are nicely cushioned. The red stitching continues back here. I would say 3 adults can probably fit here just fine, but 3 children more than adequate. As far as some of the amenities back here, I do have 4-zone climate controls. I do have 2 different types of charging capabilities, USB Type-C and a 12-volt. There is a reclining feature with these seats, which is always a wonderful thing, and you can kind of lounge back here. And the panoramic roof, even though it doesn't extend all the way back, so I can't really look up directly and see out of it, I do have a nice glimpse viewing out, which is always a nice thing for the backseat passengers. So that's it for the back seat. Now let's look at the trunk. Now let's cover the trunk, and remember, this is still a Q8 under all the RS skin, and that means it has more cargo space than a Porsche Cayenne Coupe and the Lamborghini Urus. You've got 30.5 cubic feet of space when the rear seats are up, and 60.7 when folded down. You can easily fit a large stroller in here, and if you rack and stack, 2 to 3 larger pieces of luggage. Alright, so now let's talk about what makes this the RS version of the Q8 before we take it out on the road, starting out with the engine. So this is a 4-liter twin turbocharged V8 that generates 591 horsepower and 590 pounds-feet of torque. It's putting all of that power down via an 8-speed automatic transmission, routing to all 4 wheels via Audi's Quattro all-wheel drive system, and as a result, the RS Q8 goes from 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds. So this is a seriously fast accelerating SUV. It's also got some trick suspension getup as well, a sport rear differential, an RS tuned air suspension with adaptive dampers, so you can change the ride characteristics the way you like, and even anti-roll bars to keep this over 5,000 pound SUV as flat as possible in the corners. So as you can tell, the RSQ8 is a pretty serious SUV. So serious that it held the Nürburgring lap record for the fastest SUV around the track at 7 minutes and 42 seconds, and then it was eventually overtaken by the Porsche Cayenne GT. Nonetheless, it just goes to show you how serious and how capable of an SUV the RSQ8 really is. But something tells me that you're not as interested as the lap record as you are with how this thing behaves on the road. So let's take it out for a spin and see how it drives. All right, so let's see what this RSQ8 is about. Put it in drive, release parking brake, and let's take this thing for a quick spin. And immediately when you sit in this car, it's got a great driving position. You sit nice and high, and the overall feel of it is really nice. Now you'll notice that I'll be comparing the driving dynamics of this car to two cars. First is the Porsche Cayenne S and the Lamborghini Urus. Now both of these cars are driven, and the reason why I'm comparing it to these two cars is because number one, they are the closest competitors to this in terms of the Lamborghini Urus is basically this same car, just with the Lamborghini badge and a little bit more horsepower. And the Cayenne S is the most recent kind of sporty SUV I've driven. And even though the direct competitor in the Cayenne lineup to the RSQ8 is the turbo trim level, I haven't driven that. And the Cayenne S is basically within the same price range as this. It has a starting price of $105,000, but you basically can't find any of those for under $120, considering options and things like that. So now let's go ahead and put this car in RS1 mode, and I've configured that to be the sportiest mode. Everything is in the sportiest setting. The differential, the steering, the suspension, the ride height is in its lowest setting, and also the engine is in its most aggressive as well. So let's go ahead and get a straight. Oh, I've got a nice clear road in front of me, and mash. Little laggy there. Oh yeah. Woo, baby. Woo, the yippee-ki-yay! Woo, look at that. Woo, that was a big number up on my head-up display. Downshift, blip, mash. Yes, baby, look at this thing go. Wow, this thing is really fast. Oh, the exhaust note coming through is great. And the little bark that you get on the upshift is fantastic in this RSQ8. Oh yeah, I like that. It's like this really metallic and I guess raw sounding on the upshift. Very, very nicely tuned by Audi here. So this is pretty fast, and yeah, really aggressive sounding and very aggressive in terms of speed as well. Yeah, this is yeah, properly quick. I'll put it to you that way. So the power delivery is great, lots and lots of torque down low to get you moving, and also when you're rolling, the horsepower number, that close to 600 range, is really nice. The exhaust is great as well. When you put it in the RS1 mode, or RS2 for that matter, it opens up and it's a lot louder, and the burbles are very apparent. Even here at idle, blah 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 blah, it sounds really cool. So from a speed standpoint, this thing is much faster than a Cayenne S. And then when I say Cayenne S, I mean the new 2024, the one with the V8. It's much more aggressive sounding, much faster. But from a Lamborghini Urus comparison standpoint, it's slower, yes. And I think the part to underline here is the emotional feel of it. The Lamborghini engine is a little hotter, and the tone of it, the overall engagement with that engine and the feeling that it delivers is just a little sportier. But man, this thing is just as savage and aggressive. So yeah, I mean, the Lamborghini name is just gonna have a little bit more emotion, but from a street standpoint perspective, when you mash the gas, this thing nails you to the back of the seat, and you're not gonna feel any shortage of speed, that's for sure. All right, now let's switch over and put it in comfort mode. And let me tell you about the rest of this thing. The transmission is good. I wish it did have a double clutch, but even on upshifts and downshifts, the downshifts, it'll blip and it does it really nicely. I haven't tried it much in automatic mode, but in manual mode, it's great. It's very snappy. The brakes are also good. Nice bite right at the top of the pedal. Properly sporty feeling brake pedal in this 5,000-pound SUV, which is very surprising. And these are the steels. So if you're thinking about steels versus the carbon ceramics, the steels are more than adequate. You don't really need the carbon ceramics unless you're probably going to take it on a track and things like that. And even then, it's probably cheaper just to buy the steels and replace those. Now, the other part of it is the suspension. So there are multiple different ways to mess with the suspension in this car. You've got the ride height, and then you've got multiple drive mode settings. So comfort, all-road, off-road, auto, dynamic, and essentially the RS1 and RS2 settings. So RS1 and RS2 are essentially just an extension of dynamic, and they allow you to configure things a little bit to your preference. But from a sportiness standpoint, this thing is wonderful. It is very, very sporty. It's probably one of the more sporty SUVs I've driven in terms of handling and ride comfort and the overall feel when you get behind the wheel. It's definitely sportier than the Cayenne S and basically on par with the Lamborghini Urus. Now, the part that is a little surprising to me, and when I say surprising, it's because my overall expectation when I was driving this car, or when I came in to drive this car, and I tried to be as unbiased as possible, come in with a clean slate, but to be frank, my expectation was, oh, this is just going to be a softer Lamborghini Urus. And to keep it black and white in it, and to answer in a short way, or in a short answer to that question, it's yes, it is a little softer, but I think the point to underline here is what I mentioned earlier, is the emotion. It's less emotional of a driving experience, but it's basically on par with the Lamborghini Urus. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because this is basically like 85% of the way there. And the point I'm trying to make here is that this is still extremely, extremely sporty. The steering is very tight when you're driving fast, and even when you're driving slow. There's a lot of feel in here, a lot of resistance. If you're somebody who likes a lot of weight and a firm steering wheel, you're going to like this RSQ8. From a suspension standpoint, you put it in the dynamic or in the RS1 modes, it is very stiff. In the low ride height, the uneven pavements kind of do upset it, and it does feel very firm. So if you're coming in here and saying, oh, I just want a really soft and cushiony Lamborghini Urus, you'll get that to a certain extent, but this is still an extremely, extremely sporty SUV. And I mean, kudos to Audi for building a SUV that is basically 85% of the way there compared to a Urus, but basically a little bit more than half the price. So great job to Audi. Those are my driving thoughts. Now let's wrap it up with some final thoughts. So that's the Audi RSQ8. This thing is a great SUV, and it's so surprising how it gets such little recognition. The value is absolutely there. Consider the fact that this thing shares basically most of its components with a much more expensive Lamborghini Urus at about 50 to 60% of the cost, makes it absolutely astonishing. Now, even when you look at it by itself, it presents a very strong argument for being a great SUV. It can be daily driven, it can do fast, it can do comfortable, it's got great space on the interior and in the trunk, and it looks pretty badass too. So for those reasons, I think this is an absolutely wonderful SUV. So that's all I've got. If you've got any questions, please make sure you leave me a comment down below or send me a message on Instagram @DriveSteady. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.